Hello, my name is Jason Dockerill, and I've created this channel with the intention of documenting my family history. This first video will focus on my grandfather William Dockerill and is a redraft of a previously released version. William can be seen on the far right of this photo. William was born in 1913 and died in 1981 at the age of 68 when I was just 2 years old. So I just want to begin by clarifying a few things in our family. So up until recently, I always thought that William had 11 children. However, I recently discovered that he had 12. So William's first child was born in 1934 and was a boy also called William. Very sadly, he died when he was just 1 week old, and the cause of death was pneumonia. And very sadly, 2 of William's other children also died at a young age. So his daughter Marjorie died when she was just 10 months old. And I was always under the impression that the cause of death was meningitis, but as you can see from the death certificate, the actual cause was pneumonia and whooping cough. And William's other child to die at a young age was Sylvia. Very sadly, Sylvia died when she was only 3 days old. And again, I was always under the impression that the cause of death was meningitis, but as you can see from the death certificate, the actual cause was congenital heart defect. So what will this video cover? So the first thing I'll be looking at is who was William's father, and then I'll be moving on to who was William's sister, who was William's sister's father, who was William's adoptive family, why did William's sister decline the opportunity to reunite with him, and then finally I'll be talking about who was William's mother. So who was William's father? So William's surname at birth was Goody. Now I was always told that William's father was a man called Alan Dockerill. However, as his birth name was Goody, I started to wonder if this was true. Now you can see that the information on this website that I've highlighted in the middle suggests that Alan was not William's father, as it reads Bertha, who was William's mother, married Alan Arthur Dockerill. The child from this marriage was Alan Kitchener Dockerill. It then says Bertha next married someone. Her children were William Basil Goody and Constance Sheila Dockerill. I therefore decided the only way that might clarify who William's father was would be to get a copy of his birth certificate. And as you can see in the 5th column, there is no father recorded. I think the reason for this is because his mother did not get married until 1915. And back then, if a child was born out of wedlock, the father's name was not put on the certificate. Now, with regards as to why William's surname was Goody at birth, I think this is because back in those days, a child born out of wedlock was named after the mother's surname and not the father's. So this document is Alan's World War I pension ledgers and index card. And you can see on the left hand side where I've drawn the red arrow that Alan's relative to is William and that the relation is listed as child. So this was the first piece of evidence that I found that suggests that Alan was William's father. And you can also see where I've drawn the blue arrow that it says that Alan had a son also called Alan. And you can also see that Alan's middle name was Kitchener. Now the reason for this is because his father, Alan, was a member of the Kitchener's army during World War I. Now you can also see that I've drawn a yellow arrow on the card and that next to it says that the children had a guardian called Hilda Knights. So I've investigated this and I have no idea why this was. But what is interesting, however, is that Hilda Knights was from Norfolk, and this is where Alan Kitchener eventually relocated to up until his death in 1991. And this is a record of William's marriage, and you can see in the bottom left hand corner that it says that Alan was his father. So this was the final piece of information that a member of the Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire Family History Society kindly found for me with regards to William's father. So their email says, "Hi Jason, one of our committee members has found this in the Bottisham Petty Session record transcriptions. 1914, July the 6th, defendant Alan Dockerill, complainant Bertha Rachel Goody. Offence, application for bastardy order, penalty order, 1/6 per week until child 14. So this must refer to William, as Alan Kitchener was not born until 1916. So to me, this 100% clarifies that Alan was William's father. So I'm now going to move on to talk about Alan Dockerill, who was my dad's granddad. Very sadly, Alan was killed in battle in World War I. He was just 22 years of age. So this website goes on to say a bit about Alan's family. So it says that his parents were Stephen Dockerill and Eliza Osborne. And it also says that at 7 years old that he was at Crishall Grange, which I think is near Royston. So originally they were from Horseheath, and they moved to Crishall Grange when Stephen worked there, and after this they then relocated to Bottisham. I actually emailed Crishall Grange to see if they had any pictures of them, however there was no reply, and I could not find any pictures on their website. So the website goes on to name some of his brothers, Mark, George, Frank and Walter. And it also goes on to name some of his sisters, Maud, Grace and Bertha. And the website also says that he married Bertha Rachel Goody. And in the final paragraph, the website says that Alan was wounded on the 1st of July 1916 and died later in a hospital in Boulogne in France. It also says that his brother-in-law Harry Goody was also killed on the same day. And the website goes on to show that he is buried in Boulogne Eastern Cemetery and also shows his grave location. And then finally, this website goes on to show a picture of his headstone. And this website here actually shows a picture of Alan. You can find these websites by simply typing in Alan Dockerill World War I into Google. So this is a news article that I found from the Cambridge Weekly News in 1915, and it's about Alan's wedding. So I'm just going to read some of the article. Military wedding. On Thursday last at the parish church, Private Alan Dockerill of the 2nd Suffolk Regiment, 4th son of Mr. Stephen Dockerill, was married to Miss Bertha Rachel Goody, only daughter of Mr. Arthur Goody. The bride, who was attired in a costume of royal blue with hat to match, was given away by Mr. Frank Dockerill. She carried a bouquet of white narcissi and arabus, the gift of Mrs. Target. The bridesmaids were the Misses Grace and Bertha Dockerill, who wore costumes of pale blue with hats to match. Misters Walter Dockerill and Edward Webb, noted as groomsmen. So this is a copy of a news article from the Saffron Walden Weekly News on Friday the 14th of July 1916, and sadly it is about Alan's death. So you can see in the middle in the second paragraph down that it says that information was received on Wednesday morning that Private Alan Dockerill, who was wounded on July the 1st, has died. He was a brother-in-law of Private Harry Goody, who was also killed on the same day, so that several families in the village are full of grief and sorrow. Much sympathy is felt for Dockerill's young wife and 2 little children. So this is a clip from the Cambridge Independent Press on the 28th of July 1916, and it's about Alan's memorial service. So the article says, Memorial Service. On Sunday evening at the parish church, a memorial service was held to the memory of Private Harry Goody, killed in action on July the 1st, and Privates Alan Dockerill and King William Johnson, both wounded on the same date and since died in hospital. The service was conducted by the vicar, the Reverend J. M. Target, the preacher being the Reverend J. Morgan, vicar of St. Andrew's the Great, Cambridge, who took for his text the words from St. Matthew, "He saved others, himself he could not save." The church was packed, the congregation listening with great eagerness to a most impressive sermon. The article then mentions which hymns were sung at the service. So there is a book available about the Cambridge Kitcheners on Amazon's website, and you can see in the article it says, in the opening months of the First World War, 1,500 men from Cambridgeshire came forward to serve their country as a battalion in Kitchener's new army. They came from the city and they came from the fields. Many had never left the county before, let alone their country, and all too many would never return. Whether farm labourers, shop assistants, bricklayers, chauffeurs, university scholars or college porters, men from all walks of life united and became the Cambridge Kitcheners. Sent to the Western Front in January 1916, they took part in some of the bloodiest battles of the war, including the Battle of the Somme. 187 men lost their lives on the 1st of July 1916, most within a few minutes of each other as they marched over the top into no man's land and shell and machine gun fire. So the article clearly has a bit more information about Harry and Alan's deaths. So this is a World War I and II plaque which is kept in Bottisham Social Club, and you can see that Alan's name is the 7th name down from the top on the left hand side. And this is a World War I and II plaque which is kept in Bottisham Church. I actually took this picture, and again you can see that Alan's name is the 7th name down. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about what Alan's life must have been like. So firstly, he had to endure the pain of saying goodbye to his wife and children, knowing that there was a very good chance that he would never see them again. Now I believe that Alan was at war for 20 months. So for 20 months, he must have regularly seen people he knew get killed. He must have also feared for his life every day. He also had to find it within himself to kill someone else, and he had to live with this guilt. Now some men, when they were called up by the army, they ran and hid. But Alan didn't. He chose to go to war to fight for the freedom of his family and his country, and for that he leaves behind a very proud great-grandson. So now I'm going to be talking about who William's sister was. So William's sister was a lady called Constance Bertha Page, and she can be seen in this picture. So whilst I was researching Constance, I came across this website which says, Constance Bertha Page of Sycamore Road, Colchester, passed away peacefully at Silver Springs Care Home on the 19th of June, aged 100. A very much loved mother, nana, great-nana, sister-in-law, neighbour and friend, now reunited with her much-loved husband Charlie. She will be sadly missed by all who knew her. You can find this website by simply typing in Constance Page Colchester into Google. So who was William's sister's father? So Constance was born in 1920, 4 years after Alan's death, so she clearly had a different father to William. So having investigated this, the only way we're going to know is if someone from Constance's family takes a DNA test. All I can therefore do is share my opinion and research. So the first thing I did was simply to get a copy of Constance's birth certificate, and you can see that there's no name for the father in the 5th column. You can, however, see in the 8th column that the grandmother was Eliza Dockerill. So as mentioned earlier, Eliza was Alan's mother. So if Eliza was Constance's grandmother, then in my opinion the father must have been one of Alan's brothers. Now Bertha was from Bottisham, so I decided to look to see which of Alan's brothers were from Bottisham to try and narrow this down, and of course they all were. So Alan had 5 brothers, one of which was also called Alan, and he died when he was just 2 years old. So the other 4 brothers were Mark, George, Frank and Walter. So the next thing I did was to look for any history of divorces in case any of the brothers left their wives to be with Bertha, but there were no records. So the next thing that I did was to look for pictures of the brothers to see if any of them looked like Constance, and the only photo that I could find was a photo of George. So this is the picture that I found of George, and in my opinion there's no striking resemblance, so I've ruled him out. So do I think that Frank was the father? The answer is no, and the following will explain why. So the next thing I did was to try and find out if Bertha was living with a man after Alan's death. So I just want to point something out. So this is a website which I showed earlier with regards to Alan. So you can see in the 1911 census paragraph that it says age 17, a farm labourer. He was in Bottisham with his parents, brothers Mark and Walter, and sisters Grace and Bertha Jessie. It then says their address was Potter's Yard, Bottisham. So this again is Alan's World War I pension ledgers and index card. And you can see that I've drawn a white arrow next to Bertha's name, and that after her name it says Potter's Yard, Bottisham, Cambridge. So this must mean that Bertha moved into Potter's Yard after she married Alan, and you can tell by the other white arrow that I've drawn that she was still there in September 1916. So this potentially means that Bertha was living with Mark and Walter in 1916. So then I thought, if Mark and Walter were living with Bertha in 1916, were they also living with her up until her death in 1920, as this would give them the best chance of the brothers to be intimate with Bertha. So I continued to look at address history, and this is all that I could find. So this document is from 1920, which shows that Bertha, Eliza, Mark, Stephen and Walter were all living on Town Street. Town Street is now called High Street, and Potter's Yard doesn't actually exist anymore. So this potentially shows that Mark and Walter were living with Bertha up until her death in 1920. So do I think that Mark was the father? The answer again is no. And the reason for this is because he was 17 years older than Bertha, and another reason is he also had disabilities, which might be why he never got married. So that obviously means that I think that Walter was the father, as he was just 2 years younger than Bertha, and he also potentially lived with her up until her death and did not marry until after. So if my prediction is correct, Walter went on to have 2 children with his wife, Violet Simmons. So these children were potentially Constance's half-brother and half-sister that she never knew. So the headstone which you can see on the left is for Maurice Dockerill. Maurice was born in 1925 and sadly died in 1936 at the age of 11. The lady on the right is Monica Dockerill, who died of breast cancer when she was 50. Monica can also be seen in this picture with her husband and her adopted daughter. I actually sent a message to her adopted daughter on Facebook requesting that she get in touch, as I hope she might have pictures of Walter, but unfortunately she never replied. I also put a post on our community Facebook group requesting that she get in touch, but again, there was no reply. So I'm now just going to share a few other things I did to try and find Constance's father, and one of them was to try and get a copy of Constance's baptism record, which Cambridgeshire Archives kindly sent me, and as you can see there is no father name mentioned. So the next thing that I did was to email Suffolk Archives to see if they had anything on file, as Constance was born in Newmarket, and they replied to say, "Dear Jason, thank you for your email dated 16th of August 2024 regarding your great aunt. We hold the poor law records for the Newmarket Union. The only items that have survived from the 1920s are the minutes and ledgers. Both of these are concerned with the day-to-day running of the Union workhouse rather than the inmates." So no joy there. So then I came across this website which says that Bertha married in 1918. So we know that she married Alan in 1915, so I started to wonder if she remarried. And this website here, which I showed earlier when discussing Alan, also says that Bertha remarried. So was this true? So I could not find another marriage record for Bertha on Ancestry or Find My Past. So the next thing that I did was to email Cambridgeshire Archives, and as you can see they kindly replied to say that there is no other marriage record for Bertha apart from her marriage to Alan in 1915 listed in their indexes for Cambridgeshire. They then go on to say that they would need to charge if I wanted them to continue to search, and I was not prepared to pay. I actually got a quote from Ancestry to help me find Constance's father, and they wanted $5,000. So the next thing that I wondered is, if Cambridgeshire Archives have no other marriage records for Bertha in Cambridgeshire, is it possible that she got remarried in a different county? And so I contacted the Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire Family History Society, and they replied to say, "Hi Jason, I can find no record of Bertha remarrying in the Cambridgeshire indexes. I have checked Free BMD, Camdex, the Society Marriage Notice transcriptions, which covers marriages in nonconformist chapels as well as register offices, and the Cambridgeshire Marriage Index, which covers church weddings. I've also run the searches using a wildcard so that I catch all spelling variations of Dockerill. I then widened the search to countrywide on Bertha Dock, Bertha and Bertha R, no surname, but returned nothing that it looks like it could be her, I'm afraid. So it appears that Bertha did not remarry at all, which actually makes sense, as Bertha is named as a widow on Constance's baptism transcript. I also contacted the General Register Office, and they also had no marriage certificate for Bertha apart from her marriage to Alan. So who was William's adoptive family? So the lady in this picture was William's wife, and she was also my grandmother, Laura Elizabeth Nunn. And she told my dad, and I believe some of her other children, that William had his surname changed from Goody to Dockerill because he was adopted by a Dockerill family after his parents died. So I therefore decided to try to find out who this adoptive family was. I therefore searched ancestry.co.uk, which produced no evidence of where William and his siblings went after his parents' death. I therefore joined a Facebook group called the Castle Camps, Shooty Camps and Horseheath Ancestors Family History Group. And the reason I joined this group is because I was told that the family that William was adopted by was from Horseheath. And one of the users on this group is the Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire Family History Society, and they gave me the following response. finally found them in 1921. All three are together with Jessie Agnes Cole in Horseheath. No further address details given. Constance is listed as Sheila Bertha Dockerill for some reason, and all are described as orphans. William's name is given as William Basil Goody. So this shows where they went, but why did they go to live with Jessie Agnes Cole? So this is the document which shows where they all went in 1921, just as the user previously suggested. So what's interesting here is that William's surname was still Goody in 1921. So from here I decided to investigate when William's surname was changed, as I hope this might provide a clue as to who William's adopted parents were. So when I discussed when his surname was changed with my family, we all thought it made sense that his parents changed it when they got married in 1915. However, this document suggests differently. Now I cannot see a date on the document. It does, however, say that William was 7 years and 10 months old at the time. So if he was born in August, this document must have been created in June 1921. And this would make sense as it said that Constance was 6 months old at the time and she was born at the end of November 1920. So you can see here that I've received an email from Cambridgeshire Archives who have not been able to confirm when William's surname was changed. They have, however, provided a copy of his baptism transcript. So you can see that it says, on the 6th of October in 1921, William Basil Dockerill of Alan and Bertha Rachel Goody, born at Bottisham on the 15th of August 1913. So this email provides a bit more evidence that Alan was William's father. So the document that I showed previously shows that William's surname was Goody in June 1921, and his baptism shows that it was Dockerill in October 1921. So as far as I'm concerned, one of two things has happened between June and October. So the first option is that William was adopted by a Dockerill family and had his surname changed. The second is that he was still living with Jessie and that she changed his surname. So in my opinion, it was Jessie who changed his surname, as I believe that William was not adopted by a Dockerill family and that he lived with Jessie until he moved out to be with Laura. So the reason that I believe that William was not adopted is because I managed to get in touch with Constance's granddaughter. And in the process, you can see that she mentioned that the reason that William and his siblings went to live with Jessie is because Jessie was Bertha's best friend. So Constance's granddaughter also said that William and Constance lost touch when William left home. So this is why I believe that William was not adopted by a Dockerill family. So as far as I'm concerned, Jessie is the reason that I'm sat here today as Jason Dockerill and not Jason Goody. So the lady in this photo is Jessie Cole, and Alan and William are the two boys, and Constance is the baby. I have no idea who the girl with the glasses is or who the girl in the middle is. So if Jessie was Bertha's best friend, there was a very good chance she knew who Constance's father was. So I therefore created posts on local Facebook groups asking for any relatives of Jessie to get in touch in case they could provide any answers. However, there was no reply. So this baptism record shows that Alan Kitchener was baptised on the same day as his brother William. So I just want to briefly go back to this document which shows where William and his siblings were in 1921. So the address for this document is 1 The Terrace in Horseheath. And this record shows that Jessie was still living at 1 The Terrace in 1945, which was the year that Jessie died. So 1 The Terrace can be seen in this image where the red car is. So for me, this is the house where William grew up. So whilst I was researching William's adopted family, I came across this document which says that William was living on Lode Road in Bottisham in 1930. However, the reason for this is because this document is for a different William Basil Dockerill, and this William was my grandfather's cousin, and there will be more on William in my next video. So we saw earlier that Constance's granddaughter mentioned that William did not stay in touch with her after he left home. So in the 1950s, William tried to get in touch with her via the Salvation Army, and they managed to find Constance, but she declined the offer when they approached her. The question is why? So I of course asked Constance's granddaughter, and the answer was, she thought they deserted her when she was little, and when she was older she saw them, but they crossed over the road and ignored her, so that upset her and she never forgot it. I asked her about the Salvation Army visit, and she was still stubborn about it, which I can understand. So the question is, why did William ignore Constance? So when you've not seen a friend or a family member for a while, it can feel a bit awkward when you bump into them. I think that William may have well felt this way and therefore chose to flee. Still, at least 70 years on, we now know Constance's reasons. So during my conversation with Constance's granddaughter, she was kind enough to share the following photos of Constance. I'm now going to talk about William's mother, who, as you will have seen in earlier slides, was Bertha Dockerill. So this was my dad's nan. So I've done a great deal of searching to try and find a picture of Bertha. Now there are supposedly some photos of Bertha on Ancestry. However, the lady in this picture is Constance, as confirmed by her granddaughter's comments. Bertha is also supposedly in this photo, however again the lady in this picture is Constance. And Bertha is supposedly also in this photo, however only Constance is in this photo and can be seen in the middle. And you can see Jessie in the background on the far right. I'm not sure who the other girls are. And the gentleman in this photo is supposedly Jessie's brother. And finally again Bertha is supposedly in this picture, however again Constance is in this photo and she can be seen on the left. So in order to try and find a photo of Bertha, I've emailed over 40 members on Ancestry, and I've also tried load.ccan.co.uk, bottisham-pc.gov.uk, and I also emailed Bottisham Airfield Museum in the hope that they had a photo of Alan and Bertha together, however they only have World War II photos. I have also emailed Bottisham Social Club, Cambridgeshire Archives, and Cambridgeshire Collection, all of which did not have any photos. I also created a post on the Bottisham Community Facebook group to see if anyone had any photos, but unfortunately there was no reply. So Bertha's father Arthur died in Gillingham, so I therefore also created a post on the Gillingham Facebook group again to see if any relatives of Arthur had any pictures, but again unfortunately there was no reply. So another thing I did was to go to Bottisham Church to see if I could find Bertha's grave. Now Bottisham Church is where Alan and Bertha got married, and it's also where Bertha's funeral was. And it also brings back some memories for me too, as I also have some history here, as it's the only place that I've ever been arrested. So back when I was a teenager, some people I was with were walking through the church at night, and one of them decided to start kicking the lights that shine in the church to put them out. Now Bottisham Social Club is nearby, and some men caught us and restrained us until the police arrived, and I ended up spending the night in Parkside Police Station. When we got there, one of the people that I was with was sick all over the floor. Now thankfully in the end the culprit confessed, and I was released without charge. So during my visit to the church, I actually went inside the church, and this is when I took the picture of the World War I and II plaque. And whilst I was there, I also took this picture of the inside. I have to say it was quite moving to know that I was in the same place that Alan and Bertha had had their wedding. And also during my visit, I found quite a few headstones where the graving could not be read. I therefore emailed the church to see if one of the headstones was Bertha's, and if not, could they possibly tell me where she's buried. So they kindly emailed me back to say, further to your email of the 2nd of March 2024, I have done some homework. Attached is a photograph of your grandmother's entry in the burial register of Holy Trinity, Bottisham, confirming the date of her burial was the 11th of December 1920, aged 27 years. A former church warden says her name was not on a list of legible headstones in the churchyard at the time of reordering in 1967. We have no list for the cemetery. Now the parish council do have a list for the cemetery, so I emailed the clerk, who kindly said, "Hi Jason, hope your search is going well. I have found the burial information relating to your great-grandmother. She is buried in the parish cemetery for which I have control of the records for. Okay, so I have the following. Bertha Rachel Dockerill, widow, age 27, the 11th of December 1921. Service conducted by Reverend Target in Ordinary Space 209. So we know what part of the cemetery that Bertha is buried in, however, unfortunately, the location of Space 209 cannot be identified. So having researched Bertha's life, I decided to make the following video. So this is Bertha's death certificate, which confirms the cause of death was acute rheumatism, which she had for 8 days, which may or may not have occurred because of childbirth. So acute rheumatism, more commonly known as acute rheumatic fever, is an inflammatory condition that can affect the joints, heart, brain and skin. So I'm assuming that back in 1920 there was no suitable antibiotics that could treat her, hence why she died. So unfortunately I made a mistake on Bertha's plaque, as I put 1894 on it as the year that she was born. So back then I was new to using Ancestry, and I believe that Bertha was born in 1894 based on this Civil Registration Birth Index. And you can see on her birth certificate that she was actually born in 1893. So the tree that has been planted is 120 centimetres tall. So the original idea was to plant the tree in its early stages so that family members could visit the tree to see its progression. I also originally wanted to plant a 6-foot tree like the tree shown in this image. However, I was told that a tree of this size could only go in a corner, which would have meant that the tree would have been in the shade, and a rose tree needs to be exposed to sunlight. So I went for a small tree by the fence instead. So on the plaque you can see that there is a dove on the left hand side. So originally I wanted to plant a small angel statue next to the tree. However, these are commonly made from stone which fade in time, so I went for a picture of a dove on the plaque instead. And the flower in the top right hand corner is actually a solar light which automatically lights up at night time. The light has 2 different modes on it, so there's the option of making the light shine continuously, and the other option is for the light to flash. If anyone wishes to purchase something similar, the plaque was purchased from treasuredmemorieslimited.co.uk. So I'm now going to show 2 short videos of the light shining in the 2 modes available. I have to say I'll soon out the cemetery after recording these videos. She's just showing off now. So the other original idea was for Bertha to have a blue plaque, as blue was the colour of her wedding dress. However, I was concerned that the material for a blue plaque would rust, so I went for a granite plaque instead. So, what will the next video be about? So the next video will be about William's grandfather Stephen Dockerill, and in the process I will be sharing some facts and photos about Stephen, his children and his grandchildren. So that now concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed this content, and thank you very much for watching.